I'm curious, like, how you manage your state of psychological safety in times of conflict at work.
When those conflicts arise professionally, I'm trying to think through, you have to make a yawn piece, right? Like, I know fawn, yawn, I'm just making alliteration and rhyming schemes at this point. You can just call me a poet. But it's like when I do it and or taking that moment in time when those conflicts come, like I am giving myself a breath mentally. Because if I don't, then I'm going to be upset by something illogical.
We were reacting to the wrong thing.
I'm reacting to the wrong stuff. So like the conflict will only be heightened and it needs some level of a de-escalation. It's not giving any good weight to people, not good value to others, that especially if you're in conversation or in conflict with somebody on a specific topic. Like when you have these levels of conflict professionally or sitting in somewhere that, you know, you may feel like your hippo is coming to attack, what is like your innate response? And then what is something that has become a learned response?
Hello, humans. You're here for the Vine Down, the show where we talk about all things in higher ed, whether they are intense, hard-hitting topics like AI and tech, or they are softer, more sort of whole human topics like what we're here to talk about today with Sean Whitten. We're here to talk a little bit about sort of like workplace psychology, a little bit about conflict, a little bit about maintaining your emotional well-being, whether you're in a high conflict work situation or not. Talk a little bit about burnout. Sean Whitten, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Oh, absolutely. It is a privilege to be in your presence as always, even though it's not in person. This is a blessing.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And Sean, this like topic that is like sort of like a natural passion between the two of us is not part of our day jobs. Like you and I are not psychologists, we are not therapists, and we haven't even known each other. We've known each other for like a few years now. But like every time we get together, it's like this intense, like, are you thinking really hard about this? Yes, I absolutely am. And we have this, I don't even know how we surface this as a mutual interest, but talking about sort of like emotional health at work. But it became a very quick, very hot topic between us. And I think you are such an expert in this space. So thank
That's
you.
wild, given that I think the same of you.
Oh, well, good. So audience, you're in for a lucky show today because you got two armchair experts on workplace psychology. Okay, so Sean, you're very like plugged into your felt sense, and I really admire that about you. And I'm curious, the place I want to actually start is to talk a little bit about like the connection between the feelings in your physical body and the feelings in your sort of emotional world in your brain. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about like how that comes for you and how you notice that in your work/life.
Naturally, right? Work is something that is a weight. But it's a matter of like how you're carrying it in different ways. So I think work is coming for you just as much as your emotions are. Like it's hard to make a discernment between the two, because if you're doing work that's meaningful or you feel impacted by it or you're impacting others in that type of work, of course, in my line, it's higher education or education generally. In others, it might be nonprofit. In others, it might be, corporate. And so stress and fatigue and um, all those negative reactions that come from putting your heart in the work itself can have a negative effect on your body. And so like the way it comes for me personally, speaking from my own experiences, is that it's typically coming for my anxiety. And so it's like elevating these levels that is either unnecessary because there is this level of like either or thinking, or there's levels of really trying to keep things just pent up around, I can't move from my desk physically because I have to get this done. And so you feel kind of more frozen in things, and you're, just lost in that. So like your body is taking on this immeasurable weight as you continue to just feel more and more like concrete for it. But your brain is telling you all of these things, right? So like it's hard for me to not or kind of divorce those ideas at all. And I know, Emily, you've talked about this at NACAC. I know you've beyond just like, okay, your body is feeling lethargic, or you feel frozen at your desk because you feel like there's some level of a bad omen to come if you get up in that world. So I'd turn it back beyond just like, oh hey, your body's betraying you, to like, what is your brain telling you?
Yeah,
Um,
well, your brain is like driving what your body feels, and like I had to actually learn this myself. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I had to learn this for myself because I it felt very sort of confusing why under stress at work I would get flooded with feelings that felt unrelated to the situation, right? Like if you're talking about your anxiety, for example, like someone gives you some feedback at work and your logical brain is hearing them going like, "Oh, they're just giving me some feedback." But then anxiety comes on board and is like, "Nobody is safe. We're all going to die." And like I had to learn about the systems of the brain that were actually informing my felt sense in a way that feels really helpful. So you think about like flight, fight, freeze, and like some people will add a fourth thing, which is fawn. And these are like a really carefully orchestrated set of it was like a cascade of hormonal changes. And they're designed to like help humans when they are tracked by animals or other predators, like if you are in physical threat. But your body is actually doing the same, and your brain is sort of doing the same set of things when you are in non-life threatening stress situations. So if you're at work, for example, like you're in the break room and something stressful happens, your body is actually doing the same thing as if you were like running through the desert from a buffalo. And like these things are actually taking your good, like this cascade of things that happen across a bunch of different systems of the brain are taking like your good thinking offline. And when do we need good thinking? When we're in conflict at work. So like the limbic system of the brain is this thing that like guides your behaviors and emotions. And in that is like the amygdala, which is sort of guiding your emotional processing. That's like sending a signal to hypothalamus, which is the command center for the brain or for the body. And hypothalamus, like through autonomic nervous system, like that's the involuntary stuff, like swallowing, breathing, whatever. It's sort of like keying up the sympathetic nervous system and pumps a ton of adrenaline into your body, right? And adrenaline is actually functional because it's like the thing that gets you ready to run like hell. It like it
I
is
was
like
gonna
it's like
say, like, as soon as you said hypothalamus, I'm like, oh yes, I'm running from a hippopotamus. So like this obviously makes sense to me.
I love this. And yes, it is. You're running from a hippopotamus or something. And like, yeah, all those things happen. Like your heart starts beating faster, it's giving more blood to your body. You're taking in more oxygen, you're more alert so that you can like manage the hippo. And this is happening before, this is the thing to think about when you're in stress at work. This is happening before your visual centers and your audio centers are even processing what they're seeing. Like this is just a thing that's happening. Your brain is like, "Oh shit, get ready." And it's putting you into this like sort of court like and then like a bunch of things happen after that. Like a bunch of cortisol comes on to like keep you alert. And then eventually your parasympathetic nervous system comes online to like push everything down. Be like, "Okay, we're safe now." So, like when we're at work and something stressful happens in an acute way, whether it's like someone goes, "Sean, do you have some time? We need to talk." Like, like all of those things are happening all at once. And I'm curious, like you across, even like your sort of roles of doing systems and sort of managing people, process, paper, all the things. Like you've had some times where you've been in conflict with other people, and I'm curious, like how you manage your state of psychological safety in times of conflict at work, and I'd love you to talk a little bit about that.
What you're doing in the moments of conflict, you have to make a yawn piece, right? Like I know fawn yawn. I'm just making alliteration and rhyming schemes at this point. You can just call me a poet. Um, but it's like when I do it and or taking that moment in time when those conflicts come, it's I am yawning. Like I am giving myself a breath mentally because I'm otherwise going to take that task, take that person, take that project to a level that has not been invited to.
Oh, like
Um,
you're responding to an invitation that has not been issued.
correct. Right?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Because I made it up in my mind. Or because it's not as heavy as it is assumed to be.
Oh, so
Um,
like the first step for you is like right sizing something.
right. Right. Like we have to ground it in something. Right. And I would not be able to do that without some great therapy, but also, uh, it's a kind of a natural progression for folks is, we don't necessarily take that yawn. Like we don't take the second to breathe, and or pause and or quiet, our mind to thinking too fast.
You're just
we're
reacting.
we're we're just reacting, right? And we sometimes think of that as, oh yes, this is proactive, I can be doing, right? But even that is an elicited problem response in different situations. And so like in these projects and these purposes and these people management pieces, to pick a P, right? It's one of those things where like I have to yawn before I do it, right? Um, because if I don't, then I'm going to be upset by something illogical.
You're reacting to the wrong thing. You're just
I'm
like,
reacting to the wrong stuff. So like the conflict will only be heightened, and it needs some level of a de-escalation. It's not giving any good weight to people, not good value to others, that especially if you're in conversation or in conflict with somebody on a specific topic, right? Um, like you could say pineapple on pizza is the way to go. And I really feel strongly that pineapples don't belong on pizzas, right? Uh, or I could yawn and ask, where did that come from? Right?
right, like get curious about it for
Get
me or
curious about
whatever.
it. Like
Sure, sure.
move into something more wild, or you don't have to have it sit back into this idea that, oh yeah, this makes sense for me now rather than it being what's for you in the future. And I'm thinking to you, like when you have these levels of conflict professionally or sitting in somewhere that, you may feel like your hippo is coming to attack, what is like your innate response, and then what is something that has become a learned response?
Oh, such a good question. And I think a lot about the difference between the way I am like relationally, like in my friendships, in my marriage, and like me as a human outside of my work life. I actually have a really different set of like maladapted behaviors there. Like I'm can be quite reactive. I can like get sort of like get myself thrown down the shame tube. And what happens at work actually is really different because I think my set of priors on this isn't really around like I'm the vendor and people at a college are mad at my company, right? Like we didn't deliver a thing or something took longer or some piece of software is broken. And I have a set of learned behaviors that seem healthier and more pure in that arena of things than I do in like my personal life. And I think on the work side of things, the set of learned behaviors, there is a little bit of a yawn. And I have a follow up question about that for you. Like there is I think a set of things that I will do, and you'll see me do this if you're ever like my client and you're mad at me and we're in a room together, you will see me like get into my own body. You'll see like me make some kind of small movement, whether like you can sense that I'm like moving my toes in my shoes to like literally feel my feet, or I'll typing, or I'll like rub my hands together to like get myself in my body. And I will almost always do that first. And once I'm there, like once I'm back online, I will then make sure that I've like gotten all of the feedback in the room and make sure then that I am understanding it correctly. And sometimes that requires a bunch of rounds. Because if like you're mad at me and you're my customer, you're like, well, blah, blah, blah wasn't working. And I'll say like, okay, sounds like blah, blah, blah wasn't working. And you're like, well, it's not just that, it's this other thing. I'm like, okay, sounds like blah, blah, blah wasn't working and this other thing. Well, no, it's actually not quite that last thing. It's some like it's in the spirit of getting curious to like deeply understand and then make sure that you get it correct. And then you're off to the races to sort of collaborate on a good outcome, I think.
Yeah,
Okay,
because
you
it's
and I
progress,
go
right?
right, because you're like, okay,
Yeah,
you've now like
yeah.
freed up to get to a place where you can move instead of being
Yes.
frozen.
Right.
Okay, I have a question about yawn. And this is
Yes.
something that I don't have to look up. Fawn and yawn, that's assonance, not alliteration. This is the place that I was an English major, and it's like basically rhyming. So we'll use assonance for fawn and yawn. I'm very proud of myself that I remembered this from my undergraduate English degree.
Again, doctoring.
No, that's liberal arts, like, real hard.
I mean, I'm over here. Yes, just wait. Give me a date for my history major. Yes.
Right. Okay, so you and I have never been in a fight. Shocking. But if we were, would I sense the yawn? Would you ask for time? Would I perceive that you were taking a second to like bring yourself back?
I would have 100% been deadpan in the face, blank stared, and in agreement with you, but completely yelling inside.
Oh, like silent, offline, stony.
100%. 100%.
Different than stoned. Stony,
Yeah.
and like you just like agree. You would just acquiesce, like lie down in front of the train. How did that go? Why'd you make the change, Sean?
Yeah, I often felt like a rug. My mat was very welcoming. It was problematic for me, right? And I was happy to just be the person who was compliant in a fight, right? To bite my tongue and move forward, to mend it, right? 2.0, what I learned is, and what I often was told once I had fantastic leadership and mentorship from folks who I worked with, was they recognized I was thinking too fast, right? And I would in 2.0, Sean, I also got into verbalizing when I was thinking too fast, and being able to tell you exactly that. So I would first tell you that in a fight, right? Like if we were fighting in a verbal spar, I would lose, obviously, because the whole assonance alliteration piece. But number two, it is one of those things where I would, at some point in either the natural lull of the conversation or argument or what have you, tell you that I am still processing, and or downloading everything you've just said. Beyond that, if I didn't say anything and waited for everything to finish, I would let you know that I am not at a point to fully comprehend everything we just discussed. um, I would, very straightforward tell you my brain works differently, and I am slowly thinking through the pieces that you just given me.
Okay, question about that. Do you store that in your mind as like necessary vulnerability, or do you store that in your mind as a flex? Because there's a place that you could take the like, I'm just picturing you saying like, I need a sec to process this and think all the way through. And that would feel like a hard reach. Or you could also sort of store that as like a really strong move you can make in a conversation to like ask for what you need, model that behavior for others. Like, where do you view that? Or is it both?
Something that I talk with our mutual friend Adrian about is we can live in abundance, right? That was
She is so good at that. Oh man,
frequent
she is
phrase,
so good at that.
that we can live in abundance, that we don't have to have this either or thinking, right? And so I use it 100% as both. It started out a lot as vulnerability, right? Like
I have to
was
take
not
this risk
strong,
to ask.
right?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Like I was not strong enough to do anything more than verbalize that I was weak.
Great first step.
right? And so otherwise, then it was a flex of you just downloaded a lot to me. And as a processor, as a intelligence, I would be more than happy to compute at a proper time to give you a um, intentional response in that case. So like in a fight, I am often losing to win, right?
But that's
Um,
like a choice you're making
but
in the
that's a
spirit
choice,
of
right?
better
Right.
outcomes later. Yeah.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. I love
Yeah.
that.
No Sun Tzu type things. Like I don't. I'm also pretty sure I just butchered that name, so I apologize. But no Art of War stuff. I haven't read it. Definitely read a lot more Bruce Lee, Jeet Kune Do, that type of martial art. Even though that Art of War is not a martial art, it is something that feels very uh, apt when we think like strategically and or how we work with identity and conflict at work. You know, in those ways.
I don't know if that like plays in our world though. Like, right, there's a certain amount of I mean, there's a lot of aggression in the world in general right now, like in Earth, but like in our space in admissions enrollment, higher ed, I feel like the table stakes are like we're working with good humans who want to help other people, and that like shared orientation allows for a lot of room to like be yourself or to ask for the space or whatever, and to be both and vulnerable and ask for what you need as a whether it's a flex or not. But like, yeah, I feel like that's sort of the best table stakes in our world, I think.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think my first or a question that just came to mind now to you is like what position is your heart in when you're coming into these conflicts?
Such a good question. And maybe that's why work conflict resolution is easier for me because I have less at personal stake, and it's very easy to like agree that you agree with the person in conflict or the group that you're in conflict, or if you're dealing in a difficult conversation, that like you are obviously aligned for the same outcomes, which is like help, like broadly, like helping students and families, and like it's good for America when colleges stay open, right? Like it's just like a really easy shared orientation, which allows you to turn instead of turn and face each other and like have a fight. And like we're using that term, uh, like I think actually pretty like obliquely. Really, we're talking about conflict. We're not like talking about like fighting, but like there's a big difference between when you're like turning and facing someone and like needing to get your thing across, and they're needing to get your thing across, and then like turning shoulder to face the problem. That's where the movement happens. Like, and I think the thing that we can borrow from relationship sort of rehab into work rehab of work relationships is like the decision probably matters less than how you make it and making it together or making it in a way that feels like supported. Um, that's maybe not so true in work. Um, Sean, in the last couple of like, well, since I've known you, you've had a job transition and you did a lot of soul searching to get into your current role. And I'm curious if you can talk about sort of like how you cared for yourself emotionally during your job search process, because you that doesn't happen by accident for people like us. And maybe I would classify you and I as like highly feeling individuals. Like you and I are both like we feel things very deeply. And something like a job search can really feel like a big weight. That's costly. It's expensive to go through a job search. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how you cared for yourself emotionally during that time, emotional boundaries that you set during that time. I also think it's about to be spring. It's about to be the season where a lot of admissions people are going to be moving around. Can you talk a little bit about how you cared for yourself in that transition?
I have wonderful friends, um, and family and network of people. So I would be remiss if I did not start by
To
saying
thank the academy?
exactly that. Like you love me. You really love me. Um, I don't know how many references to the younger crowd will get that. But I did it anyway. Welcome in, Google it. Yeah, so I'd be, honestly, I'd be remiss if I didn't get on this. And this is also I have to make up for old and or lost other podcasts and conversations I've had in public. Like my wife, my partner, she poured into me, uh, and did not let a drop of me hit the ground, right? Um, and so, like, that level of support is something I leaned on in the job search, is that, that there's this network of, certainly in my home, partner, family. Outside of that, it was a lot more of the people within the profession who've had something similar and or are similar humans. So like turning to them just to ask, hey, what'd you do in this instance? Or I'm looking for this type of a thing, keep your ear on the ground. But beyond that, like utilizing them as a scaffold to start. Um, I took the time to divorce myself from the identity that I had built as a professional. So a lot of it was, who is Sean, 1.0, 2.0, 1.5, outside of the confines of the workspace, right? And touching grass, right? And so the big thing was, you don't have to be at a computer as you do this search. That is not the big part of your job search every day. Um, you do not have to be talking to someone every day. You can get stronger simply by getting back to the roots that you find for yourself, right? Like, I love to read. I hadn't done any reading outside of file reading for admissions, for I don't know how long. And so being able to read, books like June Jordan, to read, um, other remarkable works like Parable of the Sower, which is at this point a documentary. But it is taking those moments just as much as setting a job alert for a specific job title.
So it's like two plates you're spinning. One is like the care and feeding of yourself as you, and also like the sort of the mechanics of any job search.
See, but that still sounds kind of like juggling. You know what I mean? Like, I still sound circusy.
Okay, yeah,
Like,
tell me more.
and
Like
so by
that they
that,
can be like natural and fluid. Is that where you're going?
yeah,
Okay,
right.
okay.
Like I don't have to be Monday, walking down the street with two plates on sticks. Uh, Monday could simply just be, I'm like Belle from, Beauty and the Beast, walking with a book in my face. And then Tuesday is 100%, Gaston lifting weights and throwing around my attitude. Um, yeah, I have a daughter. There you go.
I That's the best part of my day right there.
You're so welcome.
Belle and Gaston.
And so it's just like, it doesn't have to feel like juggling. Right? It is essentially, I guess, what I'm trying to get at is like, you don't have to pick that circus. You can pick however you want to, set up your search. And like, that's kind of what I did. I set the boundary to give myself permission to let go, and do the things I wanted to do. And I was better for it going back into the search or keeping on with the search.
Yeah, no, it I think it does. I do have a follow-up question. So like the phrase touch grass, I take very literally. Like when I say touch grass, like I actually mean that I need to like touch the earth. And I have a lot of conflicted feelings about that this time of year because I have 500 inches of snow on the ground. So like I can't get to the ground. And it like bothers me. Like I notice it. I'm like, well, does touching snow count? Because the snow is touching the earth, but like the earth is down there and I can't. So I may need to come visit you in Texas to see the dirt because I haven't seen dirt for a long time.
But have you like, okay, in that instance then. So I recently asked someone, when's the last time you danced with your son? Okay, you don't have to like physically do the thing, right? But like, when's the last time you danced? When's the last time you did the snow angel?
Okay, that's good. That makes me feel healthy because both of those things are like within the last 3 days.
See?
Okay.
Like,
I'm not gonna die.
How much are we losing on this like childlike piece when we're so focused in the other like doldrums of conflict and transitions and all the things? Is like, I love that you do Hello Humans, right? Because that's what we get back to, right? And that's what we end of day when the day ends. That's what we're doing. Stripping down titles, stripping down all the other pieces. And it's, I mean, to me, like I think the conversations we've had a bajillion times, it's a lot more of the give yourself the childlike wonder back.
Right. Like allow it.
Like allow it, right? Like I just did career day with my kids. And I got to explain myself as Batman, right? At no point do I have the billions that Bruce Wayne had, nor do I have the gadgets to do these things, right? But theoretically,
Yeah, what was the pitch? What was the pitch? You're in the classroom.
So as a college administrator or college admissions person, right? The type of work that I do is a lot like Batman. I look to fight off the evils of your own. I know this sounds crazy, right? To a group of third to sixth graders, like the evils of, for lack of better terms now, imposter syndrome, right? Like, oh, I can't go to college. There's no one in my family that went to college. Or the evils of like, I can't afford this. Your institution costs too much. Those types of things. And so like that was the pitch, right? Is I ward these things off. I work with a team like the Justice League. I find fantastic students like I do with the Bat family. All of that stuff. But anyway, I say all that just to say like that is the thing, right? As humans, we could get back into these funtivities.
I love that explanation of the job. I would not have taken that approach. I would have been way more serious and way more boring. Like I think my kids like conceive of like she shouts into a computer all day. Like I don't know what she does, but like that positioning around the greater good within the context of like the Bat family is badass. That's very cool. It's very cool. I'm impressed.
I mean, I've gone from Beauty and the Beast to Batman. I don't know.
Okay, Sean, in your new job, when you're not being Batman, in the first 3 months of the job, in the first 90 days, like given that you are a deeply feeling person with a good sense of yourself, wanting to care for yourself emotionally, how do you then also scale up really fast and make a positive impact and do all the things that you got hired to do? How do you scale in the first 90 days of a new job with that overlay of like emotional well-being on top of it?
In my role currently, I went from fully remote to being in person. And so I had so much autonomy, so much love for my personal time.
Sure. And by that, you mean like moving the laundry around while you work from home?
Correct. Right.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Don't tell my boss. But it was, very much a balance I struck over the last 2 years to now being in more of someone else's space. Right. And so like the first week I came home and I was exhausted. I was just like, I have peopled so much
the whole day. Yeah.
For 8 hours, like, let alone that, the work of the job is 2 people.
Double people about people with people covered in people.
It took a lot, so my weekend was not peopling. right? So for me, in the first finding the rhythm in this new job, it wasn't just like, okay, I'm getting back in front and not just being like operations, project management in the background type work, but being more forward facing, gregarious, turn it on, greatest showman type
Sean
stuff.
on show. Yeah.
Sean on show. Um, type of thing. And so, like, to do that, I had to take the moments to build that. And so, by my second month, I had an opportunity or had opportunities where I started setting my rhythm. And so, by that, I mean, I got in a little early so that I could prime myself. And so I just started doing some of my own old rhythms in the office, right? And so when I got in early, the great thing about that was coffee maker wasn't ready. Student ambassadors weren't there to set it up yet. And what did I do at home? Set up my coffee, get myself ready in that way. And so that's became a part of my rhythm was setting up the coffee maker in the office, and getting things ready for everybody, including myself. But it allowed me to start something familiar and keep it both, familiar and fantastical to me. Um, and then taking lunch to myself if I needed to. Another moment in time that allowed me to prime for what was going to come. So for all you introverts, as you think about that, in that, like, I think about it in their space especially. And used to say in my presentations I was a recovering introvert. I don't know what that means. Like, just felt like a great
Felt accurate
oxymoron.
for you. That's fine.
Right. Yeah. uh, but it's like a simple way to build up into the relationships you need to have, right? Because I can't give my full self. Like, I imagine maybe you don't do something similar. Like, I don't imagine human Emily is, remarkably on at all times. There's going to be days when it's gloomy, you can't touch the grass, right? The snow's in the way, those types of things. Like, what are you doing to prime yourself, to rev yourself into, I have to talk to screens all day type of a thing?
Yeah. Well, it's some of the same type of stuff, right? It's like it's routine for me. It's like at its very simplest, it's sunshine in my eyeballs, quality sleep, moving my body, and taking my vitamins. Like that. If those things aren't happening, then I'm not happening. Um, so, but then there are like many other circles of things around that sure I would prefer to happen, but if they're not happening, I'm not a miserable mess. And I'm curious, like, and I watch for that. So like, I'll sometimes be like, I'm really not doing well, and be like, oh, I haven't exercised in several days, or I haven't been outside, or whatever it is. How do you like? What is the sort of leading indicator for you on burnout, and how do you recognize it before it becomes like the tidal wave, the way it sometimes feels?
What a question. Sean 1.0 absolutely burned the wheels off, right? It's probably why I have no hair now.
Like friction, like
It couldn't,
friction
right?
taken off.
Yeah, this it's not genetic. Um, no, it's uh, the things that I catch for burnout are usually not in the office, right? Like, I don't catch it until later.
Because you're on show. When you're on stage, it wouldn't come for you. It comes for you when you're like falling asleep or driving home.
Yes, or attempting to fall asleep. So I think I recognize it when I believe I'm seeing it and or it's happening to me with me. Uh, when I end up coming home at night and it's 11 o'clock and I still want to watch another episode of something. Um, like, I'm not procrastinating on something I need to do or whatnot. It's just that I'm trying to garner my time back.
Oh, I do that, but in a revenge way. Like I will like revenge stay up late because I haven't had any time to myself. So I'm like, screw it. This is my time. I'm going to scroll on my phone for like 10 hours or read whatever novel I'm reading. But to me, it's like out of revenge for time I've spent in the day. Not, yeah, it's not great.
See, but that's the thing.
I'm naming it. I'm labeling it.
I was like, yeah, maybe it's the burnout.
You're not wrong.
Uh, so no, that's what how I recognize it is like, oh, if it's Tuesday at 11 and I'm still in the chair, in the living room,
Like there's something you need to attend to.
I need to attend to something. So like I recognize it in that way. If I don't know that I recognize it very well in the office, right? Like until it's too late. Let me put it that way. So if I've said yes to too many things and I have them all, uh, and I can't answer the question in the meeting for when we need to do project X checkpoint, um, then that's when I recognize. But at that point, it's too late, right? Uh, and so like in the office, I absolutely don't know, and it's not a good mental state to be in the office to be like, oh, I don't recognize that this was something I needed to prep for. But I at home, I understand that this is coming into my life now. And that burnout is problematic. So I gotta fix it.
Heard. Well, Sean, I wish you a future chapter of touching grass, being asleep by 11 on a Tuesday night, and continued success in your role. I'm really pleased that you could join me on the show. Thanks so much for being here. Humans, do one of the things we talked about, whether it's touching grass, doing some breathing, getting back in your body, naming your weird stuff. Even better if you can do it with a friend like I did here today. Humans, be well. We'll see you next time.